السلام عليكم يا شيخنا.
عليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته. عبد الرحمن، كيف الحال؟
الحمد لله يا شيخنا.
تأخرناكم؟
نعم. نعم يا شيخنا.
إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا وسيئات أعمالنا. من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم. أما بعد, this is حلقة Āishah, and our intention in it is reading from the book Siyar A'alām An-Nubala by Imām Adh-Dhahabi rahimahullah, reading from it the Seerah, the life of our mother al-Mu'mineen Āishah radiyallahu anha as-Siddiq binti Siddiq. This is our attention in this book, and as we have repeatedly said, that the copies we depend on for this reading is the print of Mu'assasatul Risala, the print of Mu'assasatul Risala, and it has the taqdeem of Dr. Bashar Awad Ma'ruf Bundar. It has the taqdeem of Dr. Bashar Awad Ma'ruf al-Bundar. And we read from the second volume. It occurs from volume 2 from page 135. There is the other popular print by Shaykh Ayman Muhammad ibn Shaykh Ayman al-Shabrawi, which is the print of Darul Hadith in Egypt. There, the Tarjama of Āishah occurs from the third volume, page 426. But as for the print that we read from, it is the print of Mu'assasatul Risala, and that is what you see on the screen. That one occurs from volume 2, from page 135. In the previous classes that we have had, we have read about the lineage of our mother Āishah. We have read about her virtues, radiyallahu anha, how from her biggest virtue was her marriage to the Prophet Muhammad, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. If a woman is married to the president of a country, she becomes so honored, not perhaps because of herself as an individual. If she was honorable as an individual, marrying the president of the country itself becomes another honor in itself. This is the like of what we have seen for our mother Āishah. She was herself so honorable, being the daughter of Abu Bakr as-Siddiq and Ruman. This is great honor, because after the status of being a prophet, a Nabi, or a Rasul, the biggest status anybody would attain is the status that Abu Bakr attained, radiyallahu anhu. That was the status of Siddiq. And not just that, he became from amongst the leaders of Siddiqun. So it was a honor for our mother, radiyallahu anha, Āishah, to have been a daughter of a man like that, Abu Bakr, radiyallahu anhu. Now that honor became increased for the fact that she became a wife of the Prophet Muhammad, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. If she was a daughter of Abu Bakr, but not the wife of the Prophet, as it was with Asma bint Abi Bakr and Siddiq, it's a thing of honor for them, radiyallahu anhu. How now is it that she combines being the daughter of Abu Bakr and Siddiq to being the wife of Sayyid Waladi Adam? the leader of the descendants of Adam, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. We also mentioned that from her virtues was that the Prophet loved her far much more than the rest of the wives that he had. And from the virtues she has was that the Prophet taught her knowledge. She lived with the Prophet for 9 years. And for those 9 years, she learned the knowledge that she taught the entirety of the Ummah for 50 years after the Prophet. When she died, she had taught 50 years. She was 68 years old when she died, radiallahu anha. So she had taught because she was 18 when the Prophet passed away, alayhi salatu. So for 50 years, she was busy conveying knowledge to such an extent that some of the biggest, most knowledgeable personalities in this ummah came from the students of Āishah, like Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu, like Abdullah ibn Umar radiallahu anhu, like Abdullah ibn Abbas. Someone like Abdullah ibn Zubayr even grew up under the tutelage of Āishah radiallahu anhu. So she was a very virtuous and righteous woman. And she enjoyed her marriage. We have also read the how of the marriage itself, how the proposal came, and then how she became married to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. We have also read about her dealings with the Prophet inside the house, both when she was elderly, she had grown up, and when she was a little young girl. When she was a young girl, we read about how the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam allowed her to play with a doll. And the scholars deduce from that is evidence that young people can play with dolls. If you are within the age up to still being in the early teenage ages, up to 13, you can still play 14, play with dolls. But for adults, no, because we did not know any of the adults amongst the wives of the Prophet ﷺ, those who perhaps had become married before they married the Prophet ﷺ. We did not find any of them playing with dolls. That was restricted to Āishah radiallahu anha because of her young age. Likewise, she used to, from the masjid, as we read in the last hadith, if we come back to page 151, if we come back to page 151, we would find that our mother Āishah radiallahu anha, she said regarding herself, لقد رأيت رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم يقوم على باب حجرتي. Once I saw the Prophet صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم standing on the door to my room. The door to my room, the Prophet was standing in front of the door. And like we had mentioned in a previous class, that door exits into the masjid. If you exit from that door from her room, you get into the masjid. If you exit from the room through that door, you get to the room of who? Āishah. So the Prophet ﷺ was standing by that door. وَالْحَبَشَةُ يَلْعَبُونَ بِالْحِرَابِ فِي الْمَسْجِدِ. And the people from Abyssinia, Ethiopians, they were playing with hirab, with war equipment, the way people play with knives and swords and other war armaments. They were doing that in the masjid. Why were they doing that in the masjid? It was reported that it was on the day of Eid. And that day of Eid coincided with the arrival of that delegation from Habasha. So they were allowed to do the kind of play that they used to play, the kind of amusement that they used to have from their place, which was lawful. The Prophet allowed them to do that. Alayhi salatu wasalam. So while they did that, she said, radiyallahu anha, وَإِنَّهُ لَيَسْتُرُنِي بِغِدَائِهِ لِكَيْ أَنْظُرَ إِلَى لَعِبِهِمْ. The Prophet was covering me with his clothes so that I could see the play that those people were playing. She was a young girl at the time. So the Prophet was standing by the door, covering her with a cloth so that she could see the play. ثم يقف من أجله. Then he continued to wait because of me. حتى أكون أنا التي أنصرف. So he continued to wait until I became the one who would say, oh, I'm okay, I am satisfied, and then I left the place. She said, رضي الله عنها, فاقدروا قدر الجارية الحديثة السن الحريصة على اللهو. فاقدروا قدر الجارية الحديثة السن. You can estimate the estimation for a little young girl, al-jariya, a young girl, al-hadithat al-sin, who has young age. Imagine for how long she would like to watch that kind of a play. Al-harisati al-lahwi, a young girl who will have interest in watching plays. How long do you think I was spending? I was waiting. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, I was watching the play while he was waiting for me to watch the play. It says in 151, وَفِي لَفْظِ مَعْمَرٍ, in the report of Ma'mar ibn Rashid and Zuhri, it says that Āishah said, رضي الله عنها, فَمَا زِلْتُ أَنظُرُ حَتَّى كُنْتُ أَنَا أَنصَرِفُ. I continued to watch that play until I was the one who left the place. She said again, فَقْدِرُوا قَدْرَ الْجَارِيَةِ الْحَدِيثَةِ السِّنِّ الَّتِي تَسْمَعُ اللَّهْوَ. You can estimate for how long I would have stayed. I was a young girl. I had young age, and I was interested in watching that play. For how long do you think I would have stayed there? That was for how long I stayed. Radiallahu anhu. In another report of the same hadith, Al-Imam Al-Awza'i reported في هذا الحديث, regarding the hadith that she said radiallahu anha, قدم وفد الحبشة على رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. The delegation from Abyssinia arrived to meet the Prophet Muhammad عليه الصلاة والسلام. فقاموا يلعبون في المسجد, and they began to play in the masjid. What were they playing it with? يلعبون بالحراب. They were playing with knives. The way people play with knives, as if they are in a war. The other one will attempt to put the knife on the head. The other one will dodge. The other one will raise his knife. They will hit the knives, and all of these kinds of play. They enjoyed that play, and so they were having that play in the masjid when that delegation arrived to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. فقاموا يلعبون في المسجد فرأيت رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. Our mother Āishah said, I found that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam yasturuni biridaihi. He was covering me with his clothes. Don't forget, the Prophet alayhi salatu wasallam was standing in front of the door of Āishah. The door was opened, and the Prophet was covering Āishah with his clothes, and Āishah was watching what was happening inside the masjid. Wa ana anzuru ilayhim. So I was watching the people. Hatta akuna ana allati as'amu. Until I became the one who became tired. I watched and watched and watched and watched and watched until I became the one who was tired. In other reports, she said that she remained there because she wanted the people to see her place with the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wasallam. She wanted to see, even when the Prophet would want to go, she would say, La ta'ajal ya Rasulallah. Don't be in haste now, wait now, O Messenger of Allah. She would be appealing to him. قالت, she said, وَمَا بِي حُبُّ النَّظَرِ إِلَيْهِ. It was not as if I was extremely interested in watching that play. وَلَكِنْ أَحْبَبْتُ أَنْ يَبْلُغَ النِّسَاءَ مَقَامُهُ لِيَ. But I wanted to reach other women, that the Prophet was waiting for me. I want other women in the house to see that the Prophet was waiting for me. وَمَقَانِي مِنْهُ. So that I also want them to see my place, makan. I want them to see his maqam. He's waiting for me. so that they can know my place, my rank. The sight of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This was a common thing women did. It was a common thing. It was a stylish way of making the rest of the women feel that yes, this is the real wife. Every woman who has an opportunity to do that with her husband does that. Even if she be the only wife with that husband. Find women wanting to make those watching her in her marriage to see that she has a high place, she has a high rank with her husband. In page 152, Imām Adh-Dhahabi said, وَفِي حديث سعيد بن المسيب عن أبي هريرة رضي الله عنه. The hadith of Sa'id ibn al-Musayyib that he reported from Abu Hurairah رضي الله عنه, أن عمر وجدهم يلعبون. While the people from Abyssinia were having that play, Umar radiallahu anhu came and met them playing. فَزَجَرَهُمْ radiallahu anhu. Umar began to tell them, what are you doing? What are you doing? Stop this play. He began to warn them to stop the play. فَقَالَ النَّبِيُّ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمَ. So the Prophet Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam said, دَعَهُ, leave them, O Umar. فَإِنَّهُمْ بَنُو أَرْفِدَةٍ, because they are from Banu Arfida. Banu Arfida is another name for the people of Habasha. Another name for the people of Habasha is what? Banu Arfida. Why was the Prophet saying that? Meaning that you should know that Banu Arfida, they enjoy that play. So let us allow them to play. Banu Arfida. Da'ahum. Leave them. فَإِنَّهُمْ Banu Arfida. They are Banu Arfida. They are people from Habasha. And from where they have come, they play that play. So allow them play the play. And then it was a day of Eid, as it occurs in other reports. So they came newly as a delegation. It came to become a day of Eid. And so they were allowed to have that kind of a play inside the masjid. But the point of reference here was how the Prophet ﷺ took his time to allow Āishah to see what she wanted to see. And she also said it wasn't that I was actually interested in that play. I just wanted I wanted to send a message across to the women. They should recognize the Prophet's waiting for me. And they should also understand my rank with the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. In all of that, Imām Adh-Dhahabi was giving us a picture of how the marriage was for Āishah. How was that marriage? We also remember that in the past we had read from this book how our mother Āishah would go to the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam to tell him to pray for her. Āishah radiyallahu anha, she would be approached the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. She said, لَمَا رَأَيْتُ مِنَ النَّبِيِّ صلى الله عليه وسلم طِيبًا نَفْسٍ. If I observed that the Prophet was happy, he was delighted. If I observed that, قُلْتُ يَا رَسُولَ اللَّهِ, I would say, Messenger of Allah, Udu Allah Ali, pray Allah, beg Allah for me, pray for me. And the Prophet said on one occasion, Allahumma ghafir li A'ishata, ma taqaddama min dhanbiha wa ma ta'akhkhar. Oh Allah, grant forgiveness to Āishah for whatever she would have done in the past and whatever she would do in the future. This was, and so on to the end. And in the end, after the Prophet prayed for her, radiyallahu anha, she said, the Prophet said, alayhi salatu wasalam, ayasurruki du'ai, does my prayer for you, does it delight you? That dua that I made for you, does it make you happy? Qalat, she said, radiyallahu anha, wa mali la yasurruni du'auka. What is wrong with me that your dua for me will not delight me? So she had that kind of a situation with the Prophet too, alayhi salatu wasalam. We also have read her relationship with the rest of the women in the house. That the rest of the women would desire that gifts should come into the house the way gifts used to come into the house on the days of Āishah. And then they were contending that, telling the Prophet to fear Allah regarding. Said, hey, look, it's not my fault. I was not the one telling them to bring the gifts on those days. Prophet was not the one telling the people to bring the gift on those days. As for my love for Āishah, that one is from Allah. Because none of you has revelation coming to me while I'm in your room. Revelation comes to me when I'm in the room and apartment of Āishah. So we have had a general view of how Āishah enjoyed her life as a little growing young girl in the house of the best of men. Sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Before we move ahead, because I wanted to mention something, that as sweet as that marriage was, it had a trouble. It had its trial. As interesting, as nice, as exciting as the marriage of Āishah was, that marriage also had its own troubling times. During the 50th year of Hijrah, something happened. We are coming back to that. But before we come there, Imām Adh-Dhahabi said in page 152, he wanted to tell us the details of what happened during Hijrah, during Aisha's Hijrah from Mecca to Madinah. We remember that Āishah radiallahu anha was 6 years old. They were still in Mecca when the Prophet married her. They also made Hijrah as the Prophet made Hijrah. We remember that Abu Bakr and Siddiq made Hijrah together with the Prophet Muhammad alayhi. And when they were in the Ghar, in the cave, it was Asma'u bint Abu Bakr and Siddiq who was bringing food to them. She was also bringing information to them, radiallahu anha. And at that time, she was pregnant of Abdullah ibn Zubayr. She had married at that time. Asma'u had married before Hijrah too, like her younger sister Āishah. And she was pregnant of Abdullah ibn Zubayr. We remember that as soon as they arrived in Madinah, in Quba, they gave birth to Abdullah ibn Zubayr. We are coming back to that today, inshallah. So let us quickly read, how was it at Hijrah? How was it that Āishah moved? Because at that time she had not moved to the house of the Prophet. She came to the house of the Prophet as a wife when she was 9. And that was after the battle of Badr. That was when she came to the house of the Prophet Muhammad alayhi. So you will see we still have a gap, the period of Hijrah. What happened during Hijrah? So that is the glimpse that Imām Adh-Dhahabi wants to give us in our reading today, inshallah. So how did Abu Bakr's family and the Prophet's family, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, how did they migrate? Because they had migrated, it was remaining their families, their wives, and their children. So how will they come to Medina? That is what Imām Adh-Dhahabi wants to say to us. But he's reporting this hadith from Al-Waqidi. Waqidi is Muhammad ibn Umar ibn Waqid Al-Waqidi. Muhammad ibn Umar ibn Waqid Al-Waqidi. He is a weak reporter of hadith. All the A'imah are agreed that he reports weak hadith. At the same time, he was a well-known scholar as far as the matters of Tariq are concerned. As matters of Tariq, dates of birth, dates of demise, he will give you the dates. Likewise, as much as the issues of Ghazawat is concerned, wars. One of the things Al-Waqidi did was that when he came across the reports regarding the wars of the Prophet, he went there, he would check the place where they said the Prophet moved 10 inches forward, he moved forward, to he delineated the entirety of the wars of the Prophet Muhammad alayhi salam. So he's a well-respected person in terms of narrations regarding dates and narrations regarding Ghazawat, regarding Tariq and what? Ghazawat. But as for Ahadith, his narrations are usually very weak reports. In fact, some scholars say that he narrates lies. he narrated lies. What happened? He was just reporting them. He wasn't differentiating. So even when some people told him lies, he reported it like that. He wasn't the one fabricating the lies. People narrated lies to him, and he reported it just as he heard it. And you know the Prophet had warned us regarding that, alayhi salatu wasalam. He says, Man haddatha bi hadithin yura annahu kadhibun fahuwa ahadul kadhibain. Whoever reports a report, it is authentic, it's not reported authentic, he's just reporting it. He is ahadul kadhibain. He's one of the two liars. The first liar is the one who fabricated it. The second liar is the one who transmitted that lie without verifying. So this was what happened to Al-Waqidi. So still, if people, the scholars find reports and they can't find, they will tell us that, well, Waqidi said this regarding this. But we know who Al-Waqidi was. Fortunately, this report occurs in At-Tabaqat by Al-Imam Ibn Sa'd. It also occurs in Zadul Ma'ad by Al-Imam Ibn Al-Qayyim. In Zadul Ma'ad, he was also referring to At-Tabaqat of Ibn Sa'd. And Ibn Sa'd has reported it from Al-Waqidi. So whether you go forth or backward, it is from the reports of who? Waqidi. So let's just hear it as one of those things we have heard being said about what's happened during the time of Hijrah. So Al-Waqidi, Al-Imām Adh-Dhahabi said, Al-Waqidi yuqala. This report comes from Al-Waqidi, and he said, Haddathani Musa ibn Muhammadin ibn Abdur-Rahman, that Musa ibn Muhammad ibn Abdur-Rahman reported that an Rayta is Rayta bintu Hurayth. Rayta, her name is Rayta. She was from the students of the Tabi'iyat. She reports narrations from those who reported from the wives of the Prophet. Those who report from the wives of the Prophet, they are Tabi'iyat. So she is from the Atba'u At-Tabi'in. The woman is from the Atba'u At-Tabi'in. What's her name? Rayta bintu Hurayth. So Rayta bintu Hurayth reports from Amra. Amra was a Tabi'iyya. Amra binti Abdur-Rahman. Amra bintu Abdur-Rahman. She was a very learned person. She also lives inside the house of Āishah. She has a lot of reports from Āishah. What's her name? Amra. One of our brothers' names is that Amra. Amra was one of the female students of who? Āishah. She lived right inside the house of Āishah. She's the one that Al-Waqidi mentions in this hadith, that she reports this narration from who? From Āishah. About what? About Hijrah. She said, قالت, that Āishah said, رضي الله عنها, لما هاجر رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم إلى المدينة, when the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم, after he left for Medina, we remember that the Prophet left together with who? Abu Bakr as-Siddiq. Before that, many of the companions had left. Umar radiallahu anhu had left. When Umar left, there were about 20 in the group that Umar went with. The first set of those who came were Ammar ibn Mus'ab ibn Umayr. Mus'ab ibn Umayr were from those who came to Medina first amongst the companions, and they were teaching the people of Medina the Quran and all that. Mus'ab ibn Umayr and others amongst the companions. But from those who came last was who? The Prophet himself, alayhi salatu wasalam, and who? Abu Bakr as-Siddiq. They left on the same day. The Prophet left together with who? Abu Bakr. The story is well known about the hijrah of the Prophet. So when the Prophet left, Āishah was reported to have said in this hadith that لما هاجر رسول الله عليه الصلاة والسلام إلى المدينة خلفنا وخلف بناته. The Prophet left us. At that time, Āishah was in her father's house. Yes, there was marriage, but she had not grown up enough to go to the house of her husband, the Prophet Muhammad. So she said the Prophet left us. خلفنا. He left us behind. وخلف بناته. He also left his daughters behind. Ruqayya was left behind. Zainab was left behind. So the daughter Fatima was left behind. So the household of the Prophet, they were also behind. Likewise, the household of who? Abu Bakr as-Siddiq. Asma'u was still behind. Abdullah ibn Abi Bakr as-Siddiq was still behind. So we were left behind, but the Prophet had gone. فَلَمَّا قَدِمَ الْمَدِينَةِ. So when the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam arrived in Medina, settled down in Medina, and we remember that when the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam first arrived in Medina, where was he staying? He was staying in the house of Abu Qatada al-Ansari. Now, Abu Ayyub al-Ansari. When the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam first got to Medina, he was staying in the house of Abu Ayyub al-Ansari. He stayed in that house for 1 month. There were a lot of reports about what happened. When Abu Ayyub and his family were staying upstairs, the Prophet was downstairs. Abu Ayyub was uncomfortable. How can I be staying on a roof on top of a house? The Prophet was under me. He wasn't comfortable at all. And when they served the Prophet food, after the Prophet was because he was trying to say the Prophet should go up. The Prophet was saying, no, a lot of people come to visit me. Let me stay on the ground floor. Say, hey, but I can't be sleeping on top and you are under me. O Messenger of Allah. So in the end, the Prophet moved up. So whenever they served the Prophet's food, himself and his wife, they would not eat. So whatever was remaining, the Prophet ate, alayhi salatu. They would eat from where the hands of the Prophet, alayhi salatu salam, had touched from the food. Abu Ayyub, he was really feeling honorable about the Prophet's stay in his house before the masjid was completed and the apartments of the wives of the Prophet were completed. The Prophet stayed with Abu Ayyub al-Ansar. And there were a lot of reports that the companions from amongst the Ansar, they were bringing food to the Prophet as a visitor will be entertained. Although that entertainment took place where? In the house of Abu Ayyub al-Ansari. Radiyallahu anhu. So Āishah radiyallahu anha in this report, it said that she said, فَلَمَّا قَدِمَ الْمَدِينَةِ. When the Prophet arrived, of course, in Medina, بَعَثَ إِلَيْنَا زَيْدَ بْنَ حَارِثَةَ وَأَبَا رَافِعٍ. بَعَثَ إِلَيْنَا زَيْدَ ibn حَارِثَةَ وَأَبَا رَافِعٍ. He sent Zayd ibn Haritha. We know Zayd ibn Harith. He is the only companion Allah mentioned by his name in the Quran. The only companion that Allah mentioned by his name in the Quran was who? Zayd. That occurs where? In Surah Al-Ahzab. فَلَمَّا قَضَى زَيْدٌ مِنْهَا وَطْرًا. Allah mentions Zayd's name in the Quran. Zayd ibn Haritha. He was very close to the Prophet alayhi salam. So he was sent together with who? Abu Rafi. Abu Rafi was a freed slave of the Prophet Muhammad alayhi salam. So the two of them were sent to Makkah, according to this report. وَأَعْطَاهُمَا بَعِيرَيْنِ وَخَمْسَمِائَةِ دِرْهَمٍ أَخَذَهَا مِنْ أَبِي بَكْرٍ. The Prophet gave the two of them بَعِيرَيْنِ, 2 camels, وَخَمْسَمِائَةِ دِرْهَمٍ, and 500 dirham, silver coins. أَخَذَهَا مِنْ أَبِي بَكْرٍ. He took those money from who? From Abu Bakr as-Siddiq. That was the help that Abu Bakr's money did to who? To the Prophet Muhammad alayhi salam. And that's why in Sunan al-Tirmidhi, in other books of hadith, and Sunan al-Nasai, the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam was saying that, مَا نَفَعَنِي مَالٌ مَا نَفَعَنِي مَالُ أَبِي بَكْرٍ as-Siddiq. No wealth benefited me the way the wealth of Abu Bakr as-Siddiq benefited me. So you can see, even during the time of Hijrah, Abu Bakr still gave 500 silver coins to ease the movement of the family of the Prophet ﷺ from Makkah to Medina. So he gave them 2 camels and 500 silver coins. أخذها من أبي بكر الصديق. The Prophet had gotten that money from who? From Abu Bakr. يشتريان بها ما نحتاج إليه من الظهر. The Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam told Zayd and Abu Rafi that this money يشتريان بها ما نحتاج إليه من الظهر. They will use it to buy what we need from the basic things of the house. الظهر, the basic things we need in the house, the basic needs. We need soap, we need clothes, we need food, we need slippers, we need this. They will spend that money to buy it. وَبَعَثَ أَبُو بَكْرٍ مَعَهُمَا. Abu Bakr as-Siddiq also sent, along with Zayd and Abu Rafi, he sent Abdullah ibn Urayqit al-Laythi. Abdullah ibn Urayqit al-Laythi, the Ba'irain aw Thalatha. He also sent this companion, Abdullah ibn Urayqit al-Laythi. Abu Bakr sent him to Mecca from Madinah with 2 camels or 3 camels, with about 2 or 3 camels. وَكَتَبَ إِلَىٰ إِبْنِهِ. Abu Bakr also sent a letter to his son, Abdullah يَأْمُرُهُ أَنْ يَحْمَلَ أَهْلَهُ رومان وَأَنَا وَأُخْتِي أَسْمَاء. He instructed Abdullah, his son, أَنْ يَحْمِلَ أَهْلَهُ, that he should come. He sent those camels, 2 or 3 camels. He also sent a person to come with the camels, along with Zayd and who? Abu Rafi. Since then, he also gave them money. Okay, they should bring his ahl, his family. Who are those? Ruman and who? And Āishah and who? And Asma. All of you should come to Madinah. Radiallahu anhum. Don't forget that at that time, Asma bint Abu Bakr as-Siddiq was already married to Zubayr. This is evidence that a woman may be married and she may still remain in her father's house. When Āishah married, at this time, she was still in her father's house because of her young age. But Asma had been married, and yes, she was still in the father's house. Don't forget that Zubayr ibn Awam was rich. So it wasn't because Zubayr was poor. Or maybe because of the purpose of Hijrah. They arranged it like that, such that Asma will still be in their house until the time that everybody will move to Madinah. But the hijrah of Asma bint Abi Bakr as-Siddiq took place from where? From the house of Abu Bakr, under the care and financing of who? Her father, Abu Bakr as-Siddiq. So they all moved. And don't forget again that Asma bint Abi Bakr as-Siddiq at that time, kanat hamila. She was pregnant with Abdullah ibn Zubayr. And as soon as she arrived in Medina, she gave birth to the baby. She gave birth to Abdullah ibn Zubayr. Because the Jews were saying that, Qad saharatkum, that they had made sihr to the Muslims. Fala yuladu lakum. And you Muslims, you never give birth to a baby in this Medina. But when Asma came, she gave birth to Abdullah ibn Zubayr. So amongst the Muhajirun, the first child to be born in Madinah was who? Abdullah ibn Zubayr. Amongst the Ansar, the first child to be born was who? Nu'man ibn Bashir. It wasn't long that Asma gave birth to Abdullah ibn Zubayr that Nu'man ibn Bashir was also born. So he broke that lie that the Yahud were saying that we have bewitched you Muslims. You will never give birth to a baby after this hijrah. So Asma'u came, radiallahu anha, and she was brought. Her father had sent a letter to Abdullah, يَأْمُرُهُ أَنْ يَحْمِلَ أَهْلَهُ رومان وَأَنَا وَأُخْتِي أَسْمَاء. So Abdullah was commanded by his father to bring Ruman وَأَنَا, and myself, Āishah, وَأُخْتِي Asma, and my sister Asma. فَخَرَجُوا, so they left. فَلَمَّا انْتَهَوْا إِلَى قُدَيْدٍ, when they got to a place called Qudayd, اشترى زيد بتلك الدراهم 3 أبعرة. Zayd ibn Haritha purchased with those dirhams How much was he having according to this report? He was having about 500 dirhams, Abi, that Abu Bakr had given to the Prophet. The Prophet had given to them, alayhi salatu wasalam. So he bought 3 ab'ira. Ba'ir is one camel. Ab'ira is what? 3 camels. So he bought 3 camels. ثم دخلوا Makkah. And then they came into Makkah. They were coming from Madinah. When they got to Qudayd, they bought 3 camels and then they came. وَصَادَفُوا طَلْحَةً يُرِيدُ الْهِجْرَةِ بِآلِ أَبِي بَكْرٍ. So when they came, they met Talha. And Talha wanted to make hijrah. They had left, but Talha had gone to prepare the children of Abu Bakr and Siddiq. I will take you, don't worry. Your father has gone, I will take you. I hope that we understand the scenario. So when those who were particularly sent from Medina came, they saw that Talha was also preparing to take them from Makkah to Medina. رضي الله عنهم فخرجنا جميعا. So all of us left together. Who and who and who? Zayd ibn Haritha. And who? Abu Rafi. And who? And Abdullah ibn Abi Bakr al-Siddiq. And who? And Āishah. And who? Ruman. And who? Asma bint Abi Bakr al-Siddiq. And who? Talha. So all of these, she said, radiyallahu anha, فَخَرَجْنَا جَمِيعًا. We all left together. وَخَرَجَ زَيْدٌ وَأَبُو رَافِعٍ. Zayd and Abu Rafi, they came with Fatima. Don't forget. So in that group, there was also who? Fatima radiallahu anha, the daughter of the Prophet sallallahu wa Ummi Kulsum. So there was also Kulsum there, the daughter of who? The Prophet sallallahu. And the second wife of who? Uthman ibn Affan. When Ruqayya passed away, the Prophet married Kulsum to who? To Uthman. So she also came. Was Sauda also came. You see now. So it's the whole family of the Prophet. Sauda was already in the house of the Prophet. She came immediately after her marriage. Don't forget. Wa Ummi Ayman and Ummu Ayman. Don't forget that Ummu Ayman, she was initially a freed slave from the family of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And she even took care of the Prophet when the Prophet was young. But she became later married to who? To Zayd. After Zayd left Zainab, Zayd married Ayman. And from the two of them, they had who? Usama ibn Zayd. So during that trip, Imām Adh-Dhahabi reports from this isnad, as we had read it earlier, there was Fatima, there was Kulsum, there was Sauda, there was Ayman, wa Usama. Usama too was there. Usama ibn Zayd ibn Haritha. Our mother Āishah was reported in this hadith to have said, فَاصْطَحِبْنَا جَمِيعًا. So all of us, we went in the company. So how many were there now? There was Abu Rafi. There was who? Zayd ibn Haritha. There was Abdullah ibn Abi Bakr al-Siddiq. There was Ruman. There was Āishah. There was Asma. There was Talha. There was who again? There was Fatima. There was Kulsum. There was Sauda. There was Ayman. And then there was Usama, the son of Ayman. 12 of them. She said, فَاصْطَحِبْنَا جَمِيعًا. So we all went in a company. حَتَّى إِذَا كُنَّا بِالْبَيْضِ. Until we got to a place called Al-Bayd. It was one of the localities. She said, نَفَرَ بَعِيرِي. My own camel that I was riding on Nafarat. That camel began to have issues. Like moving away from the rest of the camels and not complying and moving together with the rest of the camels. وَقُدَّامِي. And in front of me was what? A mihaffa. There was a mihaffa. The mihaffa is the hawdaj. The hawdaj is something like a house. You remember they used to place it on a camel. So there was Qudami مِحَفَّةٌ فِيهَا أُمِّي. My mother was inside that one, ahead of me. رضي الله عنهم. فَجَعَلَتْ أُمِّي تَقُولُ. So when my own camel was refusing to move with the rest of the camels and was moving away, my mother began to say, Wabnata, that is shout, oh my daughter, Warosa. So my mother began to make clamors of worry over me. Why? The camel that I was riding was not becoming conformant with the rest of the camels. It was walking away as if to say, going in its way. So my mother began to say, my daughter, my daughter. Don't forget that she was a little young girl at that time. Radiyallahu anha. Hatta adraka ba'iruna. Until my camel came back to its senses, it came back to normal. Faqadimna, and then we arrived at Madinah. Wal masjidu yubna. And at that time, the masjid was still being constructed. This was a general information. It's common in the books of Seerah. And when they mention it, they refer it to Ibn Sa'd in his book At-Tabaqat. If you go and check Ibn al-Qayyim, he also mentioned it in Zadul Ma'ad. So that's how they repeatedly mentioned it. But the absolute of it has come from Al-Waqidi. And Al-Waqidi is not a reliable report of hadith. But the story is very common. Even in one of the newest books on As-Sirah, Al-Lu'lu' al-Maknoon, Fi Sirati Nabiy al-Ma'mun, by Dr. Musa ibn Rashid al-Azib. That one occurs in 4 volumes. It was also mentioned in it. And they will refer to Ibn Sa'd and Zadul Ma'ad. If you go back to Zadul Ma'ad, it was reported from Ibn Sa'd. If you go back to Ibn Sa'd in At-Tabaqat, you find out that it is from the report of who? Muhammad ibn Umar ibn Waqid al-Waqidi, who is a weak reporter of hadith, but it's a common narration about what's happened, how the family of the Prophet and the family of Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, how they made the hijrah from Makkah to Madinah. Then Al-Imām Adh-Dhahabi said, وَذَكَرَ الْحَدِيثِ. And then he mentioned the reports. If you go to the Hamish, to the footnote here, is أخرجه ابن سعد في الطبقات والواقدي ضعيف. Al-Imam Ibn Sa'd, Muhammad ibn Sa'd, reported it in At-Tabaqat, and Al-Waqidi, who reported it, is known to be a weak reporter of hadith. Yes, it's a weak, but it's common. It's very, very common in the books of Seerah. The next thing we'll be looking at after generally seeing how the marriage was interesting was Sha'nul Ifk, the matter, the big issue of the slander, the lie, the challenge that happened during the marriage of Āishah. It was a big challenge. The marriage was sweet. The marriage was interesting. The marriage was astonishing. The marriage was exciting. The marriage was full of goodness. The marriage was full of barakat that we even still benefit till today. We remember that Al-Imam Al-Hakim Nisaburi, rahimahullah, he said, حُمِلَ عَنْهَا رُبْعُ الشَّرِيعَةِ. يعني حُمِلَ عَمَّنْ عَنْ عَائِشَةَ رضي الله عنها رُبْعُ الشَّرِيعَةِ. 1/4 of the entirety of the Sharia of the Prophet Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam was transmitted from who? From Āishah. And she did that within a period of 50 whole years. So her marriage was filled with barakat. Her marriage was filled with khairat. Her marriage was filled with the guarantee of Al-Jannah. She asked the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, who amongst your wives will be with you inside Al-Jannah? Who? Tell me. Who amongst your wife? Man min azwajika fil Jannah. Who amongst your wife will be in Al-Jannah? Qal, the Prophet said alayhi salam, Amma innaki minhunna. As for you, innaki minhunna. You are certainly from my wives who will be with me in Al-Jannah. Radiyallahu anha. He was asked alayhi salatu wasalam, Man ahabbu nasi ilayk. Who is the most beloved of human beings to you? The Prophet said, Āishah radiallahu anha. So their marriage was sweet. Their marriage was interesting. Their marriage was astonishing. Their marriage was filled with barakat and khairat. Yet, it had a very, very big challenge. And that challenge, that trial, came from the munafiqun. And that's why we all must understand too. No matter how sweet your marriage is, it will have its own challenge. Many times people tell lies on those who are involved in trying to make people happy about marriage. They make you think that marriage is ever sweet and smooth. No, there are hard times during marriage. And one of the hard times that our mother Āishah faced in marriage, where her patience was on trial, and the entirety of the ummah caught the cold of that trial, was Qissatul Ifk. What happened when she was slandered. Bi'idhnillah, this is where we will come back from our next class, bi'idhnillah. What Al-Imām Adh-Dhahabi calls Sha'anul Ifk. What happened during Al-Ifk. Ifk is slander. So what happened when she was slandered? When our mother Āishah, people told lies about her and spread that lies. How did it happen? What happened? What effect did it have on the marriage of Āishah? On the ummah of the Prophet? What effect did it have on the Prophet himself? Bismillah, we'll come back to this in our next class, inshallah. About Rahman, if we have a few questions we can take today, inshallah.
Jazakumullah khairan, ya Shaykh.
Ameen, ameen. There's a question here, and I think it's, someone asked about the full name of Abu
Regarding
Ayyub.
the report on what? That is the first one. Now,
Someone is asking about the full name of Abu Ayyub al-Ansari. I had mentioned in one of the classes in Al-Adab al-Mufrad. His name was Khalid ibn Zayd. Can you hear me? Khalid ibn Zayd. That was the full name of Abu Ayyub al-Ansari. The man who welcomed the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam for a full month in his house during Hijrah in Madinah. His name was Khalid ibn Zayd Abu Ayyub al-Ansari. Khalid ibn Zayd al-Ansari Abu Ayyub radiyallahu anhu. Himself and his wife radiyallahu anhu. I hope that answers that question about the full name of Abu Ayyub. I mean, you can go on about that.
This one says, regarding the report from Al-Waqidi, whom has been referred to as weak reporter from scholars of Hadith, how can we relate with this particular report of his? Is there any corroborating report on this particular Hadith?
I have not seen any corroborating report. I have searched and searched, I have not seen. If a corroborating report exists, perhaps Al-Imām Adh-Dhahabi would have mentioned it. I have not seen any corroborating report. And that's why, but if you read it from other books, you will think that it is authentic. If you read it from Zadul Ma'ad by Ibn al-Qayyim, he just brought a part of it and mentioned it. Then the tahqiq, the editing that I have is the editing of Shaykh Shu'aib al-Arnaout and Shaykh Abdul Qadir al-Arnaout. They were the ones who said that we should go back to Tabaqat of Ibn Sa'd. Now, if you go back to Tabaqat of Ibn Sa'd, you will find that it is from the report of who? Al-Waqidi. Now, if you come back to more recent books of Seerah, like Al-Lu'lu' al-Maknoon, fi Sirat al-Nabi al-Ma'moon, you will not find anything in it except that to say you will find it in Tabaqat ibn Sa'd and where? Zadul Ma'ad. So the whole report comes from Tabaqat ibn Sa'd and it does not have a corroborating report. And that's why I repeatedly said that this report is weak, even though it is commonly mentioned when they talk about how the Prophet's wife came and Abu Bakr's wife and their families, how they moved to Medina from Mecca. They always say it, but that report has come from Al-Waqidi. That all the scholars are agreed that is a weak report of hadith. بل فيه من يكذبه منهم. There are some of the scholars who will say that who is kadhab. If they say it's kadhab, I have told us how it happened. It was not as if he himself was a liar, but he was reporting reports of liars without clarifying that I'm reporting from a liar. So if you report from a liar without mentioning that you are reporting from a liar, who are you? So the lie will be ascribed to you. So that was what happened with Al-Waqidi, rahimahullah. Otherwise, he was a well-known scholar of Tariq. He was also a well-known and reliable person when it comes to the issues of Ghazawat, things that happened during the battles of the Prophet Muhammad, alayhi salatu wasalam. So that is how to handle and relate with this author of Al-Waqidi we have read. Is it clear about the Rahman?
Ya Shaykhana.
Now,
another question says, if Usama was born in Mecca, does it mean Zayd already divorced Zainab in Mecca and the Prophet married her much later in Medina?
Well, this is what has been reported. Don't forget that this report is from the report of Al-Waqidi. And we have told us the problem about that report. But still, if you go back to the books of Seerah, that Usama radiallahu ibn Zayd radiallahu anhuma hibbu Rasul, Usama was about 17 when Prophet died, alayhi salatu wasalam. And the Prophet only spent 10 years. He died in the Rabi'ul Awal of the 11th year. The Prophet died in the Rabi'ul Awal of the 11th year. It would mean that Zayd was born in the earlier times, let's say 4 or 5 years or 6 years before Hijrah. That is what it will mean. If Usama was about 17 when the Prophet died, alayhi salatu salam, he sent him to head an army. That army is called Jaysh Usama. Jaysh Usama was ready to leave before the Prophet died, alayhi salatu salam. So at that time, it was said to be about 16 or 17. So that will make us understand that yes, Usama is most likely about 5 or 6 years old before Hijrah. So, okay, so how and where did the case happen with Zainab? This will make us understand that perhaps it happened in Makkah. Allahu Alam. But the marriage of the Prophet ﷺ to Zainab took place in Al-Madinah. The marriage of the Prophet ﷺ to Zainab took place where? In Medina. And that's why you find that the person who reported it and the details of it was who? Anas ibn Malik. Anas ibn Malik did not become connected to the Prophet ﷺ until when? After Hijrah in Medina. So he reported the details of the marriage of the Prophet between the Prophet ﷺ and who? And Zainab. What that will also mean is that it doesn't mean that as soon as Zayd and Zainab became divorced, then immediately the marriage took place. Allahu A'lam. Do you understand? If we come back to the details of that marriage between Zayd and Zainab, we'll be able to place the dates more accurately, inshallah. I mean, I'm just trying to postulate it from what I understand and other historical evidences. Allahu Akbar. But if we come back to the details of that marriage, we'll be able to place it in terms of the date. I hope that it is clear.
No, ya Shaykh.
No.
Another question says, is it permissible for a couple to delay childbearing until the wife graduates from university in order to adequately care for the child?
Well, I don't know the meaning of adequately care for the child. That a woman is in the university, it does not stop her from getting married. The university is meant for adults. No lecturer will send a woman out of the class because she has a child behind her. The university is meant for adults. I remember when I was an undergraduate in 1997 or 98, there was a man who later became a rector at one of the federal polytechnics. At that time, his own son and himself, they were undergraduates. He was a rector. His son was an undergraduate. I'm just trying to say that there's no age limit to university education. So there can be age limits in terms of youngness. But in terms of oldness, there is no, every adult can be a grandfather and you are in the university pursuing a first degree. So likewise, a woman can have a child behind her and she's pursuing a first degree. So the university is for adults. It is not for children. And from the things that is expected of adults is that they bear children and take care of children. So if a woman says because she's in university she can't have a child, I don't think that's any kind of a excuse that's really tenable. You just be yourself because there is no difference. All you need to do is provide a convenience. You have a room and then you have someone who can take care of your child when you go to class. Or you back your child behind your back and go to the class. The world will not fall. I have experience about this. I have 2 children that I gave birth to when their mother was an undergraduate. And the heaven did not fall. 2 boys. One in part 2, one in part 3 to 4. One in part 2 to 3, the other one part 3 to 4. So it's something that's very possible. And we have a lot of brothers who have wives as undergraduates. Many. In fact, I know someone in medical school who has a child. She's 5th year now. She has a child. We knew many others before now. So it's not a tenable excuse. Marriage makes us become more serious than young people. So be serious with your marriage and with your husband. So have children, procreate, be serious, and then get your marriage moving. Because one of the things that strengthens marriage are your children. So strengthen your marriage with children. May Allah protect us. Many marriages would have broken today if those marriages don't have children. Many marriages. If there wants to be a problem, they say, start thinking about your children. So those are the children now you want to delay. Don't delay children because of school. Do it together. Carry on with life. And become a man. Be a man if you are the husband. Be a woman if you are the wife. And live your lives. May Allah protect us. Even non-Muslims do it. They have children and they are coming to school. I was in a university in 1993. I was in a university far south, Akwa Ibom State, in 1993. We had women who had children and they were coming to school with their children. Kufar. So what is the shyness or what the Muslim will be running away from? May Allah make it easy for them.
Ameen. Jazakumullah khairan.
Ameen.
This one says, a father that doesn't pray regularly and doesn't see bad in someone abandon Islam to another religion be a wali to his daughter that is planning getting married.
No, we can carry that kind of a father along, but we can obtain the statement of marriage from his brother or his own father and the like of that. If he doesn't pray, then avoid obtaining the statement of marriage from him while we still carry him along the proceedings of the marriage. I hope that it's clear about that.
Okay. Maybe the last question. We already overspent the.
Now, the questioner says, I would like to know the authenticity of the hadith. Mamata for the Qawmat Qiyamatu. An elaborate scholar's view on it.
Mamata qad qamat qiyamatuhu is common as a statement with people amongst the early Muslims. But as a hadith, no. But as a statement from the Salaf, yes. What they mean by qad qamat qiyamatuhu is a matter when he dies. His own judgment has started. What it means is that from the time you die, you begin to see the rewards of your good deeds if you've done good. You also begin to see the rewards for your evil if it is evil that you have done. And that is the essence of the day of Qiyamah. Yawmuddin, the day of recompense. So that recompense starts from the time of death. When you die, you will see your good deeds. If it is good, you see it. If it is evil, you will start getting start reaping the fruits of it. Allah protect us. But that is the meaning of man mata qad qamat qiyamatuhu. He begins to see what he will see on the day of Qiyamah. In terms of reward for deeds, you will begin to see it. The way we shall see our rewards for good deeds on the day of Qiyamah. So his own Qiyamah has started. It's also Qiyamah from the sense that he is now cut off from this dunya. Because Al-Qiyamah too is not in this dunya. Yes, the Muqaddimat of Qiyamah is in this dunya. But Qiyamah itself is not in this dunya. So فَإِذَا مَاتَ. So when the person dies, قَامَتْ قِيَامَتُهُ. He started Akhirah. He has started the journey of Akhirah when he dies. So there are so many meanings to this. It's a valid statement, but it's not right to ascribe it to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam as a hadith. I hope that it is clear about that. I mean, we can stop here, inshallah. We come back to class to read about Sha'nul Ifk, what happened when our mother Āishah was slandered. May Allah protect all of us. Radiyallahu anha. Subhanakallah wa bihamdik. Ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka.
Jazakumullah khairan.